All right. Welcome, everyone. My name's Don McGrath. I'm from the Institute for Teaching and Learning Innovation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this What's Working webinar, our first for 2024, where we're sharing experiences around generative AI and a few questions around digital learning more broadly. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country and joining with the University of Queensland in acknowledging the traditional owners and their custodianships of the lands on which we meet, and say it's an absolute pleasure to work at an institution that provides this acknowledgement, and I think this connection and opportunities to learn more around the people who have been a part of this land for so many centuries. So our plan today is that we have 3 presentations from people who've been doing some really interesting things across the university, Melanie Fleming, Phil Sharp, and Chris Frost. And then I have a few things that I would love to discuss and provide some updates with at the end. Because someone let me get access to the slides, I have thrown in some silly images that I've generated from a range of image generations around the topic. The prompts are on the slides as we go.
Cool.
Melanie, are you ready for me to press the button?
Yeah, I am. And I've done something a little bit similar, but not quite to you. I've got 2 images on my slides too. One is with the ostrich with the head in the sand, and one is Chicken Little. And I chose them. They're not generative AI images. They're public domain, free for use. I did have references, but I didn't put them in this slide because on this slide because they didn't fit. But anyway, I thought these were symbolic of some of the attitudes about AI. Let's ignore it and pretend it'll go away, or hope it'll go away. And the other one is the sky is falling on my head. It's the end of the world as we know it, kind of thing. So, and we can fit somewhere in between, I guess, those approaches. So I think we were really interested in how our students felt about generative AI. There was lots of hyperbole about what students were doing with AI, some of it nefarious or presumed to be nefarious. And what we really wanted to do was get a better understanding from the students' perspectives, what their attitudes were, what their perceptions were, and maybe what they needed help with. So we had a pretty unbalanced view of our students' uses of AI. And so we enlisted the help of the Slokey team, which for those of you who don't know is a group of students in EAT that have got some training in teaching and learning. They do small scale teaching and learning projects with me, up to bigger scale actually, teaching and learning projects that have spanned a whole year or more. So they have great student networks and they've got great perspectives from the students' point of view that I don't have. And so they're able to sort of interpret things back to students and interpret things back to me and the rest of the staff, I guess. We really wanted to know from the students in a very positive way what they were doing with AI, how they were feeling about it. And we didn't want to be seen to be sort of snooping or spying or trying to collect nefarious information on them and their uses that could be used against them in a court of law type thing. It was really from that, what do you want to know? What do you think perspective? So we enlisted the help of our staff, students. We used the common rooms, the first year engineering learning centre. There's too many acronyms in my slides, I apologise, but that's not enough space to spell everything out in full. So, and what we found was that students predominantly used AI, and I'm using AI very broadly there, because they wanted to understand what the hype was about. That was their major reason for using it. Following on from that was to see how they could use it in their studies or assessment. Obviously, that those things go together, and really to satisfy their own personal interest. One of the things that surprised me quite a lot was their relatively limited knowledge of AI technologies. So there are, I don't know how many AI technologies there are. I'd say there's lots that I don't know about, right? But we asked them about 10 to 12 different technologies. They really only knew about 3. And of those, most of them really only knew about 1, and that was ChatGPT. They didn't really regard Siri or Alexa, I think, as a type of AI, even though I think more of them have used it than realized. and Google Bard was one of the other ones that they had used. There were a substantial majority, of students who had not heard of Poe by Quora or Perplexity AI or Claude or UChat or ChatSonic. I'd say 80 to 90% of our students hadn't even heard of those technologies. So their understanding of, exposure to and use of AI technologies, at least at the end of last year, was relatively narrow. I think that may have changed a bit in the last 6-7 months, but who knows? There were some very mixed views of AI and the use that it could be put to. I guess the extreme was that some students wanted to do everything themselves. Some students claimed they've never used AI, which is plausible, possible. And I guess some use it every day. One of the things that really hit me was some are using AI every day to do stuff. What that stuff is, I need to dig a little bit deeper to find that out. But for the ones that didn't use AI, they didn't want to, didn't see the need, didn't see it as relevant, and see it as unethical. That was a very small minority of our students, though. The ones that did use it, they wanted to also know more about how they could use it for future employment. And I think that's something we're maybe, in terms of career relevant skills and uses and needs, and I think that's something we've sort of falling down on. Just saw something in the chat, but I'll keep going. Perceptions and attitudes towards AI, they said they understand that UQ courses have different rules about the use of AI, and they wanted to keep that. They wanted to know more about how generative AI could be used in their careers, as I've said, how it could be used in their learning, and they think they understand the issues associated with using generative AI. I'm not sure that they all do. I'm not sure that we all do either, having said that. They have a less strong opinion that it's helpful with assessment and a less strong opinion that the solutions generated don't require, they think they need editing, but they're less strong on those views. And they do see the risks associated with supplying personal or sensitive information to AI. So some students don't want to use it because they don't want to supply further information out, which I also totally understand. They thought it was less useful for things like PowerPoint presentations or developing concepts like drawings and schematics. But what they do use it for is editing answers to be more professional, summarizing written articles and writing simple code. I'm not sure how I'm going for time, so I'm going to wrap up. The lessons learned, purely practical ones. In the future, I would redo the survey to see how it presents better on mobile devices. We had some feedback that wasn't a very long survey, but on a mobile device, if you've got quite complicated questions, it splits vertically down the screen, not horizontally, and most of our students are probably accessing these surveys through a mobile device. So that's good feedback to make the survey more user-friendly, I guess. Response rates, as per usual, are impacted by the time of semester. I think they're also impacted by the nature of the topic. I think students are somewhat worried they're going to be in trouble for answering questions about their use of AI, even though we were keen to suggest that we weren't doing it for any nefarious purpose. What I would do differently is, if we were redeployed the survey, I'd probably want to ask things more specifically about how they adapt their prompts when they don't get the answers that they think are correct, what they do in relation to that, how they understand or what they understand hallucinations to be, but how they also apply their critical thinking skills with regards to AI technologies. Do they understand which technologies are better to use for what purpose? And the general gist of this survey is that I think they don't understand that at this point, or a lot of them don't. And also the big one to me is, how do we support students to use AI, I guess, appropriately, responsibly, and to develop their skills? We know industry are already using AI in some capacity or shape or form in some industries. That's only probably going to increase. How do we develop appropriate learning resources? How do we embed that in courses? How do we ensure that the students and the staff are getting the right training and the right support to move forward with skills in this area in the future? I don't know if that's enough time. I think I've probably spoken for plenty.
Thanks, Melanie. Really appreciate it. If anyone would like to throw questions into chat or turn on a microphone and ask Melanie questions, I think it's really great work. And I think, as you've hinted, that ongoing conversations with students to understand what they're doing and where they're up to, I think is really critical for our work, both to support students to use these technologies well as how to learn with them. Melanie, there's a question in chat from Luke. My 3 there.
3. About fear. I saw that crop up. I don't know why the predominant response is fear. Is that fear of us asking them, or fear of using AI, or fear of what? I think there's fear about what AI means for their future careers. I think there's a genuine fear among students about how that will translate to employment, whether they'll be out of a job before they've even finished their degree sometimes is one of the more extreme ones that I think I've encountered. Fear of academic misconduct. Yes, I think there's definitely a fear of that, but that doesn't seem to stop some of them.
I suspect there's very different emotional responses across our student cohort.
Yeah, and I think I'm just thinking about one particular course, or 2 courses actually, that teach introductory programming. I'm not sure if I should say this, but there seems to be a perception that there's been an increase in student misconduct since ChatGPT and similar technologies have been available. And I think there's several issues there with regards to students not understanding the complexity of programming and the relevance and benefit that it could have potentially to their careers. But also this view that I've come across before, that there's one right answer, and if only they knew the one right answer to the coding problem that they've got, then they would be fine. And if they can get somebody to give it to them, or something to give it to them, they're sorted. They don't realize it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think we're also struggling with that as staff. What skills do students need to have in regards to AI and its use in coding? The students who responded were all students in the faculty of EAT. Sorry, I didn't include that information. They were mostly undergraduate, and they were a mix of international and domestic. They would be predominantly domestic. They represented civil engineering, electrical, EECS, so IT, computer science subjects, and to a lesser extent, I think there were only a handful of architecture students who responded to the survey.
Oh, I might wrap things up there, Melanie. Thank you so much for your contributions, both the work that you're doing and coming along today. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it.
Cool.
If anyone would like to contact Melanie and ask for more information, you're welcome to. Melanie's incredibly busy and may not forgive me for making this offer, but I've always appreciated Melanie's responses and that opportunity to reach out. So thank you. Phil, can I pass on to you, and I'll press a button
sure.
here.
You just good. I'm not on mute. So my involvement with AI has mostly been from the integrity space, sort of what the students fear, I guess, according to Melanie. So I'm from SCMB. We were very much caught on the hop in semester 1 last year. Most courses went for the no, don't use AI, generative AI. And that resulted in about 70 cases being referred to the 3 integrity officers. And I ended up being the person who dealt with most of the generative AI cases. They tended to be, as you might suspect, from postgraduate students who maybe have more computer nous to start with, tended to be English as a second language speakers, and our master's students in biotechnology. That was partly because their assessments in biotechnology in particular were very much essay based, and that's where they used most of the generative AI in, generating a review of a particular product in biotechnology or something like that. Semester 2, we managed to convince most of our course coordinators to switch to allow generative AI, but with referencing. And so that automatically cut our cases. Semester 1, we decided we would interview nearly all students because we were getting referrals. Oh, there's a high Turnitin score for AI. When we talked to a lot of those students, we had lots of, well, quite obviously, the students had not used generative AI, but it was Grammarly, or for international students, they were using DeepL Translate, and it was being marked by Turnitin. So we were worried from three viewpoints. Too much workload for the integrity officers to remotely handle, students getting lots of false referrals, and were we actually picking up all the students who were using generative AI against instructions anyway? So what we decided to do was the integrity officers got together with the discipline chief examiners, and we said, we're going to look at all the assessment in our school. And I like to call this the traffic light system. Green, things that were resistant at the moment to generative AI. There should probably be a little asterisk there. These tended to be things like the supervised exams and also the second year lab reports in chemistry and biochemistry, which tend to be highly technical, and AI is not doing a good job with those at the moment. Yellow, some things that were potential problems. Mostly this was allowing people to do essays, but allow them to use generative AI, which we assumed they were going to do, but most students would cover their track sufficiently. Red, there were assessments that we just said, look, this cannot happen anymore. We had unsupervised online exams worth 20% or more of a course mark. We had a student who got 81% for a commercialization of biotech exam, who, when I talked to her in an investigation, probably didn't know 60% of the words that she'd used in her answers. So we have gone to much more supervised exam assessment. We also looked at some of the outcomes. So in first year chemistry, we had been using online quiz systems from a particular publisher, and we noticed that the students who were scoring 95 to 100% for their quizzes also tended to be the ones scoring 20% on the end of semester exams. And the students in the 90 to 95% for quizzes were also getting 90, 95% on their end of semester exams. So there were things that obviously we could not keep doing. We used the historical record of number of integrity cases to go back to particular course coordinators saying, you're submitting way more integrity cases than other course coordinators. What do you need to rethink? What do you need to improve? We did see the appeal to course coordinators worked best when they could see the personal benefit, less work in them reporting integrity issues. And they also saw the point that the students need to be satisfied that assessment in a course was fair. It was important that the same message was coming from the integrity officers and the discipline chief examiners. So that bit worked well. We did find some course coordinators were reluctant to change, and so we started involving them in our preliminary investigation meetings so they could appreciate what we as integrity officers were looking for. A lot of those course coordinators just saw the AI score and turn it in as, oh, it's 20%. The students cheated, and they lacked a little bit of understanding of what that Turnitin score actually meant. We have started asking at our examiners meetings course coordinators about the integrity issues in their courses. One thing that we really, really need to do to help students is to be more explicit about what computer-based assistance is allowable. So a lot of our false reports were coming back from Grammarly and Grammarly Plus. And, you know, we think the university needs to be much more explicit about that. For our international students, a lot of them are writing their essay questions in their mother tongue and then doing a back translate into English. And of course, that gets flagged as AI. And the university policy is still not clear on that. Some of these changes we do know have resulted in decreased feedback to students. So for example, in first year chemistry, we got rid of online quizzes. We shifted to in-workshop assessment, which somebody needs to mark, and they're probably not getting as much feedback over the whole course content now. So we've had to make those things. The referencing of AI has been useful. We see that about 60% of students are using it, 40% are not, and even when they're allowed to. But we're using their use of AI, we're going to feed that to the students from the next iteration of the course and say, well, these are the ways that AI might be useful for you doing this assessment. So that's what we've been doing. It's working well. We've dramatically lowered our number of integrity issues for this semester. One problem we are seeing is students who are being picked up for traditional plagiarism. Their penalty is often to rewrite. Those rewrites are coming back as AI generated. So AI generation is a quick way, apparently, to students to deal with things that they want to turn around quickly. Yes, so that's what we've been doing in SCMB.
Thanks, Philip. Really appreciate it. A whole heap of things that I'd love to learn more about. The one off the top of my head is, I assume you've been looking at some of the prompts that students have been putting forward in assessment, or have you gotten to that bit yet?
Well, in my second year course, they do a science communication assignment. They do a video. I asked them to submit a spreadsheet log with their prompts. Their prompts are very, very basic. It's tell me about enzyme kinetics type stuff. They're not very sophisticated at all.
All right. I think that's one of the advantages, I think, of getting those prompt indexes that I think people are, well, I know I'm underestimating. I think other people might be too, and how valuable they are to help us understand where students are at. All right.
I think a lot of the very low level use is a replacement for a Google search. They just want a general introduction to an area.
Yep. I've been seeing some of that coming elsewhere as well. Chris.
So Philip, thank you for that. And apologies if this put you on the spot too much, but I'm just wondering, one of the things you mentioned was that you feel like there's less feedback with the shift to more in-class assessment or in-class assessment. Have you managed to have a think about ways that you could increase the amount of feedback in that in-class assessment?
Yes, the particular issue was the people in that particular first year course. Our first year chemistry exams are a mix of multiple choice and short answer questions. They were happy to give students multiple choice type questions on Blackboard. They were not willing to get students to put in short answer questions. So they're missing feedback on, roughly 50% of what they're going to have to do in exams. Our problem with the online quizzes were that we were using a product from Macmillan, which is also used in the US and Canada. And even before Gen AI, the answers to every possible question were available on Chegg, Even Google, sometimes you could start typing in a question, the answer would appear before you finish typing it. Which is hard for us because a lot of our first year course content has a basic level of knowledge, which is universal, and everyone in the world teaching first year chemistry is going to be asking those type of questions. The nice thing about the online system was that it was mastery based. So students had multiple attempts at questions and we had a large data bank to choose from. We're also, one of the things that we particularly liked about that system, which we would like something like Inspera to do, is to have automatic marking of chemistry structures that are drawn by the student. And that's something that those platforms have, from the publishers, have been doing for 10 years and Inspera still won't do. We think longer term we will be moving our assessment online to Blackboard and or Inspera if we can get the right question types for what we want to do with students.
All right. Thank you so much. I have one more comment around a process that went through assessment subcommittee and teaching and learning student experience committee recently, which was to add on to the guidance for course profiles to include a machine translation option as well, to clarify to students when machine translation is usable and allowable, as well as generative AI as a broader category of stuff. So hopefully that'll be out in time for semester 2, but waiting for that to finish moving through properly and be finalized. Otherwise, Phil, thank you so much for your work as well as presenting today. Really appreciate it. I'm going to silently applaud and hand over to Chris and say thank you again so much.
Thank you. So 2 very tough acts to follow. Thank you. So what I'm here to present about today is something that is being piloted at UQ, and I've just been informed that the trial ends on October 30, and there are some seats available. And hopefully that link will work if you're interested in a license. With that out of the way, what this tool does, it's an H5P tool where you can upload a Word document, PDF, video, audio, all sorts of types of content. And it will analyze what you've uploaded, and then it looks for the concepts and then tries to come up with some learning activities around that. So we can choose flashcards, quiz questions. There's drag and drop activities, all sorts of things, and it'll do its best to try and create activities for students for H5P. It does take a little bit of time to process, of course, but what you get back, you can edit the results and then sort of pick and choose and figure out what's of value in that. And you can see on the right there, there's an example of a YouTube video I uploaded about modern slavery, some resources that we're doing for the social sciences, and I've given an example of how why it's important to choose the concepts, because in this case I left fresh produce ticked and it wasn't really relevant to the material. So in this case, it's turned the YouTube video into an interactive video, and it pauses whenever the speaker mentions a key term, and then lets you see a definition. Next slide, please, Dom. So I don't know what's happening with the formatting of this, but that's okay. So it does have a number of limits. Some of them include, there are some pretty severe word limits or character limits. There's 50,000 characters you can upload or include. And there's also, it's not really good for subjective or relational content, or how to chemical reactions and physical numericals. So Philip, I'm sorry, I'm not sure it's going to be that great for that sort of content. At the moment, it only does English language content, and it can't deal with images or equations or spreadsheets, but it is very good at doing definitions, concepts, basic facts, and knowledge recall. And one of the things I like about it is it generates a glossary, and I think that can be very helpful for some students. Some of the other differences is you can't, with ChatGPT and Copilot, you can sort of guide the output you get by specifying the learning objectives or giving some extra context. You can't do that. It doesn't, it's not like a conversation, so you can't go back and say, that's nice, but can you focus more on this or change the language in some way? And it doesn't all start with certainly, which is a difference from ChatGPT. It's very much, you need to guide it, you need to moderate. It's really up to us to add the higher order or image-based activities. Everything else really has to be cherry-picked. And I would say that it tends to generate too much and really need to cull what isn't relevant. So only the audio track of video is analyzed. So it doesn't really look at images at all, which is one of the reasons that it's probably not so great with equations, etc. And the audio content is transcribed, not captioned. So if it's time, you don't get the captions along the bottom in time with the video. So you just get what the text is. So in some cases, it's not that great. And of course, the example I showed before, it was a YouTube video of an ABC, uploaded by ABC, and then it's been analyzed by the system. I'm not sure what the copyright considerations are there. Maybe this is a bit where you cut that out, Dom, so I don't get in too much trouble. Next slide, please. So with that in mind, I think really bring it back to learning and teaching. So it's really not very good at the higher order thinking, and this is where adult supervision is needed. We need to come in and really focus on those things and add that sort of content ourselves. I think it's just a matter of time before it'll have non-English language content and it'll get some of that image recognition in there. And again, it's good for the basic stuff, the understanding of remembering level. And that's me. I think that's all I have to say about H5P Smart Input. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I know there's a few other people in amongst the group here who've tried it as well. Ben has added a comment. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask around these tools, I think it's an interesting space to play. And I think sometimes a reassuring place to play to help us see what we can do that machines can't yet. Thanks, Chris. Anyone? Going to pause awkwardly for a moment. All right, then I'm going to move on. I'm going to add some more slides, talk about a couple of things. Chris is going to be courteous enough to hang around for a little bit longer. If you ask a particularly tricky question, he may have trouble with his connection and disappear, but encourage you to take the opportunity while he is here to try and post some further questions and see what you can learn around from Chris in general, as well as more around H5P Smart Import.
You're breaking up, Dom.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks again for the presentation. So a couple of things that I wanted to talk about while I have everyone here. We're looking at reviving the digital learning community of practice. So we've tried to have a digital learning community of practice for a little while. It feels like it's been a little bit on life support, and we're trying to resuscitate it into a lively and engaging community. And while I go through some other slides, I'd love your opinions around what would you like to discuss if we managed to get a group of people together to talk around digital learning practices broadly at UQ? Should we focus more on generative AI? Are we missing things around VR, AR? Are they of interest? Should we be going to some of the core aspects of designing digital learning with core tools? essential arguments around multimedia and pedagogy and assessment, any of that space, I'm really intrigued to see where people go. And also, are there any particular people across the university that you would like to talk to and you would like to invite in? While you're thinking about that, we have invited someone in, and we have asked my colleague, Professor Kelly Matthews, had a conversation with Chris, DVCA, who mentioned he was keen to talk around generative AI and had a keynote he prepared for elsewhere. And so Kelly invited Chris to present. And so we're having a combined teaching focused network and hopefully kicking off a digital learning community of practice with Chris talking around generative AI. It'll be an interesting opportunity to ask around where he's thinking and potentially influence the way he's thinking around generative AI, which promises to be an interesting afternoon. Chris has thought deeply about this area and he is not afraid to be provocative. So I would encourage you, if you're interested, try and come along. The link will be shared later. If you want to book it in your diary, it's the 29th of April from 2:30 to 4. And this is the sort of thing we can continue to do with the digital learning community of practice. If there's people who are in senior positions at UQ, people elsewhere, or people you know across the university who do interesting things, we can invite them along. One of the things that you hopefully know about across the university is the Teaching Innovation Grants. I have a platform, so I'm going to say please consult, please collaborate. I think the best grants that have come out across the years have been connected across multiple areas of the university, both to have that impact as well as to bring together some brilliant people to be able to do interesting things. So some of the key dates, the call for applications has been out for a little while. Applications close on Friday, the 26th of April. So that's coming up very, very quickly. By my maths, that's next Friday. If you don't have an application going and are keen to, please get started. Please talk to people quickly. And there are some really great projects in development. We also have staff from ITS available later in this week and next week to consult. So if you have a project that relates to technology and feel that talking to someone from ITS could help refine your plan, please reach out to Italy and get those contact details. We're sorting out the details tomorrow. There's a range of priority areas, which I don't think is a big surprise, but just want to highlight them. And there are a range of categories. I really want to highlight the early career academic nomination or option for applying for a TIG. There's a budget up to 15,000, a dedicated funding for this, and a fairly generous definition of an early career academic. So if you are in a position where you can apply for one, highly encourage it. We have seen some really interesting and innovative stuff coming through in that space, supporting people to get their careers up and running. The other thing that's happening, and I encourage people to apply for, is the teaching awards. It feels like there's been less talk around these with the TIGs. So they're due on the 29th of April, and we have a fantastic range of categories for people to apply in. I really want to highlight the Awards for Teaching Excellence, which has got a stream for Indigenous academics. Also, we've got a new one for learning design and advisory, which I think is a really exciting thing to be able to have recognised. Last year, we introduced the Tutors Award. So if you're working with some great tutors, there's an opportunity for them to be recognised through these practices, which is really exciting as well. And on top of that, we have our regular citations, awards for programs to enhance learning, early career awards. So there's a great range of array of ways to be recognised across the university. And it's a bit of work to put in. So encouraging other people who are thinking about it, I think can be a really powerful way to support them and make people realize, yeah, they really should be applying for these awards. All right, so I'm going to jump back to chat now because I've given people some time to think. And Shari's asked, can you hear more from students in the community of practice? Okay, it's one of the things we did last year, and I'm very keen to do again this year. Has anyone got recommendations of how we best reach out to students to invite them along? So we reached out to student staff partnership groups that are doing some work in this space. We've reached out to Sloki students in the past because they're doing some really good connections and exploration, and we'll do that again. Occasionally around the university, we're starting to get a few students doing honours projects around teaching and learning and generative AI. And Emma's recommending through faculty networks. I know there's some fantastic ones out there. Okay. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to do one last thing before I lose people. I'm going to launch a quick poll and ask for some feedback about today's session. We have, so I think I'm asking you to do two things as well. A range of other workshops in this space coming up. We've got some hands-on with Gen AI sessions, so that if you're interested in doing some of these things with some guidance and trying different systems, we have people who are happy to help, and we'll be running a couple of different topics around different ways you can use Gen AI and some guidance for that. Our next What's Working will be in May, and we've got some exciting speakers starting to be lined up with that. And if you know anyone else who should be featured in a What's Working, please reach out. We're keen to always showcase some of the work across the university, and very keen for both the what's working well as well as what we need to make work better, or you know, things that H5P doesn't do particularly well. I think sharing the what's not working is also particularly interesting. And please keep adding in the suggestions. Tim's suggestion around some of the library staff and how they're connecting with students, I think is really valuable. They're doing some amazing work, and I think their work around this space is going to keep increasing. That's my last slide. And Gustavo, yes. I think some alumni and focusing on bringing some industry in and stories around how generative AI is being used out in the world beyond the university is really powerful. And my money is that that may be a feature of Teaching and Learning Week this year. Keen to try and make those things happen. All right, well, if you have more ideas, please send them through. My email is very easy to find, and I am probably more receptive than I should be. I'd like to finish by saying thank you again to Melanie, Philip, and Chris. I really appreciate you sharing what's working, and really appreciate the work that you're doing across the university. And thank you everyone else for coming along today and contributing. It's really valuable and exciting to hear about what's happening across the university. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom.